The Harmonic Convergence, Chapter 10, In Search of the Grail. As the first shafts of soft golden light heralded in a new day, we quietly and effortlessly hauled up the anchor and raised the mainsail. We all stood in awe of the morning light, a seamless transition from night into day that has graced us with its beauty from the beginning of time. The shafts of light crept over the stony outcrop that protected the entrance to the historic Set harbour. A gentle breeze filled the mainsail, and we could feel Orca II lift as she moved from her overnight anchorage. Orca II was fitted with semi-aerofoil-shaped sails that allowed her to sail closer to the wind than conventional flatter-cut sails. And as Maxim adjusted the helm and pointed Orca II westward, we headed to where the Mediterranean Sea joined with the formidable Atlantic Ocean. Maxim plotted a course west-southwest, following the coastline, albeit 20 to 30 miles offshore. In the far distance, we could see the snow-capped peak of Mount Canigou, where the Pyrenees mountain range straddled this area of Europe. The Pyrenees climbed skywards, 10,000 feet towards the heavens, and then disappeared into the far distance to the north. This vast, unbroken mountain range stretched hundreds of kilometers across the continent. It encompassed the southern end of the Bay of Biscay on the Atlantic Ocean and descended into the Mediterranean Sea close to the base of Mount Canigou. After 3 days of gentle sailing in the calm Mediterranean waters, the ancient city of Collioure came into view. At first, we noticed the well-groomed vineyards that stretched along the mountains, and then we marvelled at the contrasting terrain of dry, rocky cliffs below. Collioure was a stone city located in the corner of southwest France and well protected from the many storms that raged down the valleys from the peaks of the Pyrenees. "Isn't Collioure beautiful?" exclaimed Maxim as we neared the harbour entrance. "Collioure has a small population," he continued, "and is only considered to be a city because of the Roman annexation." We all turned our attention towards the city as the sun rose in the sky. "Oh, what are those fortified walls that are rising out of the rocks?" asked Minerva. "They look as though they are emerging out of the Mediterranean Sea." Maxim peered at the fortress. "The fortress is the lookout for the Roman garrison," he said, "and there are manufacturing and repair workshops there also to maintain the Roman ships." "Yes," added Dulcara, "as you can see, they have state-of-the-art Roman warships at the ready for surprise maneuvers." "The main reason for the garrison occupation in Collioure," said Maxim, "is because Collioure is close to the border between France and Spain. Collioure is a convenient location for border and population control between those two countries. And, of course, they also want to repress any uprising from the fiercely independent Catalonians. In any case, said Dulcara, as both countries are separated by the jagged peaks of the Pyrenees Mountains, it is almost impossible to penetrate Collioure from Spain. Well, there are only two major transit routes across the border, said Altar, one in the far north on the Atlantic coast and the other along the southern coastline on the Mediterranean Sea. Actually, said Imra, all of France is now under Roman occupation. Oh, I can't wait for our adventure up the Moree Valley, announced Cyndriella. It is going to be so exciting to trace Arsinoe's footsteps and complete her journey so that we can pick up the frequencies that she began. Yes, agreed Shamara, and take those frequencies to Stonehenge, to the Druids, and strengthen the energies of the Harmonic Convergence that is occurring in 2012. And in this way, support humanities' ascension, chimed in Asteria. Well, where is the Moree Valley? Inquired Minerva. The Moree Valley, said Irama softly, meanders through the foothills of the Pyrenees Mountains. On another timeline, Cyndriella and I accompanied Arsinoe when she fled the historic city of Set and journeyed into that valley. Oh my! So you both travelled with Arsinoe! Exclaimed Asteria. At that time, continued Irama, a Roman garrison had discovered Arsinoe's whereabouts and were determined to forcibly return her to Rome. Cyndriella and I were among the Druids who were assisting her, and from Set we journeyed to the ancient Abbey of Fontfroide, 30 miles inland from the city of Narbonne. Oh, said Cyndriella, her eyes filling with tears. I will never stop loving Arsinoe. If we all sail into Collioure harbour, explained Maxim, we will arouse suspicion as there are too many people on board Orca II. The Romans control the harbours as well as the lives of the people in all of the countries that they have annexed. Are you suggesting that we split into groups? I inquired. Yes, said Maxim. Dulcara and I will escort all of you to a hideout in an old stone cottage along the coast, and then we will sail into Collioure harbour. At Collioure, we will pick up horses and supplies so that we can all journey into the Pyrenees Mountains. And does the stone cottage belong to someone you know? I asked. Yes, said Maxim. The stone cottage belongs to my old friend, Vela, and he knows that you will be staying there. He is also the harbour master for the city of Collioure. What if he is caught hiding us in his house? Asked Cyndriella nervously. The cottage is empty, said Maxim. Vela and his family live in a villa further up the mountain. They own one of the vineyards on the cliffs. I am curious, exclaimed Shamara. How come the harbour master is your friend? Ha ha! That is a very good question, laughed Maxim. The Roman garrison have installed one of their trusted Collioure citizens as the harbour master. However, as it happens, he is my old friend Valor. On many occasions, I have visited Valor and his family in their villa, and we have shared the delightful cuisine and unique wines that are grown on the south-facing slopes. How will you get into Collioure harbour without being seen? I inquired. Maxim smiled, and I could see a glint in his eyes. It is my intention that we will be seen, he laughed. Maxim, inquired Dolkar, do you think it is wise to leave Orca II anchored in Collioure harbour, right under the noses of the Roman garrison? Of course, said Maxim. If she is obvious, she is less conspicuous. In the harbour, there are many merchant ships. Some are anchored and others are held fast to appear. Orca II will appear to the Romans as though she is just another merchant vessel. And, said Imra, his index finger raised, I am assuming that Valor will cover for you. If Orca II attracts the interest of the garrison, replied Maxim, Valor will inform them that she is owned by a merchant. Oh, so Valor isn't really a trusted citizen, is he? Laughed Imra. As long as Valor hands over the port facility fees in Roman coinage, said Maxim with a wink, and on some occasions goods that are not officially recorded, everything functions smoothly. We all laughed. After we complete the harbour formalities, continued Maxim in a more serious tone, Dolkar and I will meet you back at the cottage with horses and supplies. All going to plan, I imagine that we will be away for about 2 days. Well, what if someone comes to the cottage and asks us questions? Inquired Cyndriella with a frown across her face. We all looked at Cyndriella and could see that there was undeniably the echo of another timeline that was also filtering through into her now experience. Rama squeezed Cyndriella's hand. We will be all right, she smiled. In the unlikely event that you are stopped, said Maxim, tell them that you are friends of Valor's. Tell them that you are staying in the cottage, but you are here to celebrate his birthday. And as you will be posing as merchants, said Naishara, I am assuming that you already know people in Collioure. Yes, replied Maxim, my merchant friends are expecting us and will help us with our cover story. Sarah smiled. And what fictitious goods are you purchasing and transporting? She asked. As far as the garrison are concerned, we are waiting for an overland caravan, explained Maxim. The caravan is bringing bronze machinery from the northwest of Europe. Of course, that is not true. However, that is what we will say if we are stopped and questioned. Maxim, you are so resourceful, said Ankai, unable to suppress her admiration. Well, smiled Maxim, on another timeline I have been described as a smuggler. However, I see myself more as a free spirit. I know that I can rely on my friends in this area." We all smiled and made exclamations together, trusting that Maxim's plan would go smoothly and with no surprises. Maxim jibed Orca II, and after the boat had changed direction, we headed north along the coast. "There is a bay near the cottage that is secluded," explained Maxim, "and we can access the cottage easily from there. It is also far enough away from prying eyes." It was dusk when we entered the secluded bay. We silently disembarked Orca II, and under a clear and star-filled sky, we soon arrived at the cottage. The cottage was comfortable, and after lighting a fire, we settled around a large table to enjoy sumptuous refreshments. "I see that Vella has already been here to provide everything that we need," I said. "Yes," said Maxim. "He and his family are very hospitable." "And you said that you will be back in 2 days' time with horses and supplies?" inquired Minerva. "I have arranged for a caravan of domesticated Pyrenees horses," replied Maxim. "Vala's son, Arnaud, will be our guide, and the horses belong to Vala." "Pyrenees horses!" said Shah-Mar-Ra excitedly. "Are they the strong, stocky horses that can easily travel up the mountains?" "They are unique to the area," replied Maxim, "and as they were once wild, they are familiar with this terrain. We will trek northwards to the Abbey at Fontfroide, and from there to Rennes-le-Chateau." Later that evening, Maxim and Dol-Kar-Ra returned to Orca II. They quietly up-anchored, and with only a headsail, sailed back down the coast towards Collioure. It was the early hours of the next day when they entered the commercial area of the Collioure harbour. "Do you know where the soldiers are holding vigil?" inquired Dol-Kar-Ra. Maxim looked up towards the fortress, its silhouette dark against the night sky, and could just make out the soldiers walking around the high stone walls. "The garrison is installed in that fortress," he said, "and the entrance is by way of a small canal with storm surge protection lock gates." After disembarking Orca II, Maxim and Dol-Kar-Ra could just make out a figure who was approaching them in haste. "Hello, my friends," said Vala, somewhat out of breath, and he and Maxim exchanged a huge and heartfelt hug. "It has been a long time," said Maxim, as he slapped Vala's shoulder in an affectionate way. "And this must be Dol-Kar-Ra," said Vala. Dol-Kar-Ra held out his hand. However, Vala stepped forward and embraced his new friend. "Any friend of Maxim's is a friend of mine," he exclaimed. "Are you clear about the story for the Roman officials?" inquired Maxim. "I certainly am," said Vala. "First, we will move Orca II into the repair pen, and then I will inform the garrison commander that you are a merchant. I will explain that after experiencing a storm on your way to Collioure, you only have an emergency headsail." Vala waved his hand in the direction of Orca II. And also that you are experiencing rig and steering problems." "Excellent," said Maxim. "I will advise the officials," continued Vela, "that the shipwrights are carrying out essential maintenance, and after the boat is repaired, you are picking up cargo for an Egyptian businessman who lives in Alexandria." "Well, that sounds very convincing," said Maxim. "These are worrying times," cautioned Vela with a frown, "and the Romans are overstretching themselves in their attempt to control everything." "Yes," agreed Maxim, "we are aware of the situation." "Good," said Vela. "And now," he smiled, "I would like to take you to a bar on the waterfront and shout you breakfast." "Aha! These words are music to my ears," said Maxim, as he and Dulcara had not eaten anything for almost a day. They all sat down at a table amongst a crowd of merchants, boats, and seagulls, and after receiving their meals, Maxim and Dulcara enjoyed conversing with Vela. "After I have visited with the Roman commander," said Vela, breaking his bread in half and stuffing it into his mouth, "I will escort you to my vineyard home, high up on the slopes above the city of Collioure. It will be delightful to meet your family once again," said Maxim. "We will wait here until you return." It did not take long for Vela to return and relay his interactions with the garrison officials. "All is well," he exclaimed with his usual broad smile. "The Roman night watch saw you enter the harbour and recorded your arrival. Of course, I tactfully shared your cover story, and he took it, hook, line, and sinker. I also added that the Egyptian merchants can be a little crazy and sometimes a little simple, but despite that, they are likable." The three men laughed heartily together. "Well, we would have to be stupid to sail to Collioure in a storm," said Maxim. "When the commander asked your name," said Vela, "he could not suppress his smile, as his name is also Maximilian." "Well, how about that?" exclaimed Maxim. "A Roman commander with my name." "And now," said Vela, with a twinkle in his eye, "we must carry on to my villa above the city. Flor, my wife, is expecting us." At the villa, Dulcara once again reached out his hand as a greeting. "Oh, that is not necessary," exclaimed Flor. "Any friend of Maxim's is a friend of mine." And together they exchanged warm hugs. "It is good to see you again, Flor," said Maxim, "and thank you for your hospitality and friendship." Flor smiled at Maxim. "As always, it is our pleasure." "This is my son Arno," said Vela, as he tousled his son's hair in a playful manner. "As you know, he has prepared the horses with saddles and supplies and will accompany you to the Abbey of Fontfroide." "Yes, well, believe me, it is my greatest pleasure to accompany you," laughed Arnaud. The lifestyle on the vineyard is very peaceful. However, I am bored with the familiar routine here. In fact, I have been yearning for an adventure, and so your timing is perfect. I am delighted for you to accompany us, said Maxim. And, I will come as far as the stone cottage, said Vella, and head back into Collioure the next day. It would not be prudent for me to be away for too long. The following evening, Maxim, Dulcara, Vella, and Arnaud mounted their respective horses. The spare horses, one for each of the Light family staying in the cottage, were tethered together and carrying the supplies. Eventually, they arrived at the cottage and were reunited with their Light family. There were many happy exclamations and introductions as everyone familiarized themselves with Vella and Arnaud. We all enjoyed a hearty dinner and lively conversations as Maxim and Vella reminisced about old times. Eventually, it was time to retire for the night. We will leave at first light, said Maxim. It is a 5-day trek through the Corbière mountain range. Is that mountain range also known as the Cathar Mountains? Inquired Altar. That is correct, said Vella. It is known as the Cathar Mountains in the 14th century in Earth's future. The next day, we said farewell to Vella and mounted our sure-footed Pyrenees horses. As we climbed up the steep stony mountain tracks, Collioure became a speck that was barely visible on the coastline, and the light from the sun glistened on the azure Mediterranean waters. As the sun reached the highest point of the day, the horizon melted into the distant haze, and we could all feel the heat radiating off the dry stony ground beneath us. "It is so hot!" exclaimed Cyndriella as she wiped her brow with a handkerchief. "Yes," laughed Arnaud, "and yet it is the heat from the stones on the south-facing slopes that make the local wines so unique." "Oh," said Asteria, "I did not know that." "The summer months cannot be relied upon to bring rain to the grapes," explained Arnaud. "So the roots of the vines penetrate the rocky hillside to obtain moisture and essential minerals. It is these minerals that flavor the grapes as they ripen in the Mediterranean sun." At the end of the day, we came upon a mountain stream and decided to camp there for the night. After unpacking our supplies, we plunged into the crystal clear water and exclaimed at how it felt surprisingly cool. We gathered drinking water from the rock pools, and after a simple meal, under a starlit night, we fell asleep to the chorus of the cicadas. The next morning, Cyndriella felt excited to share a dream. She had dreamed of a young girl with auburn hair and large hazel eyes, who had nestled down beside her and whispered in her ear, "I miss you." "Well, who was she?" I inquired. "Samira, I do not know," said Cyndriella, her eyes wide open and shaking her head. She mentioned the Isle of Skye and something about meeting her mother. However, I cannot quite put the puzzle pieces together at the moment. And how did you feel when she appeared to you? I asked. Oh, said Cyndriella, she felt beautiful. I did not want to wake up. On the third day, as we trekked through the Pyrenees Mountains, we came across a group of workers resting beside their horses and carts. We dismounted, and sharing a conversation about the current times, we learned that these salt-of-the-earth Catalonians only paid lip service to their Roman conquerors. The workers also confirmed that they seldom saw any Romans occupying these high country remote and rugged hills. Well, that puts my mind at rest, said Naishara. As we journeyed on, the terrain became flat and the vista transformed into cultivated fields that were grown by the locals. Eventually, Arsinoe gathered us together and pointed to an area of the track ahead of us. Do you see there where the track widens? He explained. Fontfroide is not very far from there. We all felt excited to be close to our destination and eager to disembark our horses after 5 days of travelling. It wasn't long before we approached the main gate, built of stone and iron, and the high fortressed walls of the Abbey of Fontfroide. A man who seemed to be expecting us appeared at the gate of the abbey. Hello, he said in a deep voice. My name is Carlyle. Please, come in and make yourself comfortable. After you have rested here at the abbey, I will escort you to Rennes-le-Chateau. We were all excited to meet Carlyle and welcomed each other warmly. After a hearty meal, we quickly fell asleep, but all rose early to greet the new day. It is quite strange to sleep on the ground after being rocked to sleep on Orca II, exclaimed Shamara. Ah yes, I miss that feeling too, said Asteria. The rhythmic water lapping against the hull is not only familiar, but mesmerizing. Well, I do not miss your snoring, said Minerva playfully. At least out here in the mountains, I can move away from you. We all laughed. As we walked around the Abbey of Fontfroide, we all exclaimed at its magnificent beauty. The cypress trees and abundant bird life was simply delightful, and we enjoyed the atmosphere generated by the large ornate columns, archways, and passageways. What beautiful windows! Exclaimed Shamara. Yes, said Carlyle, they are grisaille, meaning that the images on the glass are constructed in shades of grey. As you can see, they do not have any colour. This is the most wonderful place, exclaimed Shamara. I would love to live here. Fontfroide Abbey, explained Carlyle, used to be a self-sufficient community. It once boasted large gardens, and there was an abundance of vines and specialty herb gardens from all around the known world. "Oh," said Cyndriella, clasping her hands together. "It is so beautiful. Does the name Fontfroide have any special meaning?" "Yes," replied Carlyle. "A font stands for fountain, and Foyd means cold, so cold fountain. There is a large aquifer of cool mountain water beneath the abbey, and the underground mountain water pressurizes the aquifer, creating cool fountains of water." "On another timeline," interjected Maxim with a solemn disposition, "in the 14th century, the last of the Cathars were hunted down by the Vatican just outside these abbey grounds." The Cathars?" asked Cyndriella. Do you mean the Druids?" "That is correct," said Maxim. "The Druids, after Alexandria, retreated to the Abbey of Fontfroide and became known as the Cathars." "Oh, my goodness," said Cyndriella, and clutching her chest, her legs gave way and she crumpled onto the ground. Rama rushed to her side and, stroking her back, encouraged her to feel the feelings that she was remembering from another timeline. Cyndriella burst into tears as she came to the realization that she was one of the Cathars. "It is okay to feel your feelings," said Irama softly. "Yes, you were there. You were killed just outside these abbey grounds, and I was killed there with you." We all waited while Cyndriella felt her feelings and integrated the echo from the other timeline. When she was ready, we all hugged her warmly. This was cause for a celebration. "Were there any survivors?" asked Minerva. "A few of the Cathars escaped and travelled south," said Carlyle. "They journeyed along the track that we have just traversed, and crossing the border into Spain, they found refuge in Barcelona." "A few months later, however," added Ariana, "the Vatican's henchmen caught up with them and murdered them also. They were the very last of the Cathars." "The Vatican have been merciless in hunting down the Druids," said Ankai. "And all so that they could maintain their control and deception," added Sarah. "These churchmen and the psychopaths behind them have a lot to answer for." We all stood in silence, remembering our other timelines where we were all persecuted, until eventually Carlyle broke our reverie. "And now," he said, "it is time to journey to Rennes-le-Chateau." We saddled the horses, packed our few belongings, and headed west, deeper into the Pyrenees Mountains. Carlyle knew the ancient tracks throughout the area, and we were all excited, not least of all Cyndriella and Irama, to be retracing Arsinoe's steps. We journeyed through the stunning countryside with its many rivers snaking a path through the rocky outcrops. It was breathtaking to behold the magnificent deep gorges and the ancient stone fortress ruins perched precariously above them. Finally, We arrived at the base of a mountain, deep within the Pyrenees, just in time to watch the sun casting elongated shadows before it slipped beneath the snow-capped peaks ahead of us. Eventually, we came upon a circular track that spiraled up a steep pyramidal mountain. Kalal halted and dismounted his horse, and we all came to a stop behind him. "Our horses will not be able to carry us up this track," said Kalal. "We need to walk the rest of the way to Rennes-le-Chateau." We all dismounted our beloved horses, who had transported us effortlessly without complaint so far, and taking the reins, we led them up the track. "If I didn't know better," said Irama, "I would think that the horses have enjoyed the adventure just as much as we have." As we ascended, our hearts beat in our chests until we reached the small village of Rennes-le-Chateau in the quietude of darkness. A friendly old man stepped forward to greet us and directed us into a courtyard just inside the village. We unsaddled the horses, fed and watered them, and the old man escorted us into a large timber-floored saddlery room. He explained that we could sleep there in comfort for the night, as most of the villagers at the various inns would already be asleep, and he did not want to disturb them. The following morning, we ventured out into the crisp, cool mountain air and were greeted by the most spectacular scenery: the snow-capped peaks of the Pyrenees. The peaks stretched in both directions as far as the eye could see, north and south, forming the natural boundary between France and Spain. The crisp, cool air seemed to enrich the vivid blue early morning sky that was in contrast to the shining snow-capped peaks. Layer upon layer of dark granite mountains lay before us like a tapestry, in contrast to the now glistening ice-capped peaks that stretched out in all directions into the far distance. "Ah, there you are," said Kalal, and put his arm around the shoulder of the village mayoree. "I would like to introduce you to Oriol." We all acknowledged Oriol with hugs and exclamations and relayed our journey so far. Oriol was another fiercely independent Catalonian, a resistance fighter, and vehemently opposed to the Roman annexation. It was he who for more than a year had protected Arsinoe while she was hiding from the relentless pursuit of the Roman garrison. Cyndriella was excited to learn more about Arsinoe. "Well, what was she like?" she inquired of Oriol, her eyes wide and searching and flashing sparks of iridescent blue. "She was strong," replied Oriol with a friendly smile, "and very beautiful." Irama gazed at Cyndriella, her eyes beaming with love and compassion. "I am sure that you will remember her from the timeline that you shared together," she said. After we had rested and shared refreshments, Kalal and Oriol escorted us through the uneven cobbled streets of the village. Eventually, we came upon a small and narrow circular tower that had 2 rooms on 2 different levels. On the lower level, there was a kitchen and living area, and on the upper level, there was a tall arched window that showcased the stunning view. Behind the tower, there was a small stone garden with walls around it and an elevated stone terrace from where we could appreciate the magnificent mountain vista. "Oh my goodness!" exclaimed Cyndriella as we walked into the stone building. "It feels so familiar. I remember this place." "Yes," said Irama. "This is where Arsinoe and her followers found refuge for more than a year." "This is known as the Magdalene Tower," said Oriole. "This is where Mary Magdalene, or Arsinoe, lived, and now her spirit lives on here to welcome and acknowledge all of those who make the pilgrimage to Rennes-le-Chateau." "Yes," interjected Altar, "in Earth's 21st century, this area became popular as a pilgrimage for people who believed the deception of the historic researchers and wanted to follow the trail of Mary Magdalene in the Jesus story." Oriole nodded in agreement. "And do you see that mountain?" He pointed across the valley in the opposite direction from the village and back towards the Collioure Mountains. "Yes," we all acknowledged. "Well, as the crow flies," continued Oriole, "that mountain is approximately 20 miles away. However, to walk there by track, it would only take 2 days." The mountain was known as Mount Bergerac, and it is referred to in the stories of Gilgamesh. It is known as the place where the world ends. "I remember that story," interrupted Naishara. "It was thought in 21st century Earth that the end of the world was imminent. In fact, in 2012, it was claimed that Mount Bergerac would provide safety." "Yes," nodded Oriole. "Several years prior to 2012, those who had decoded the messages from the Bible journeyed to the village at the bottom of Mount Bergerac. They believed that this location would facilitate their departure from the old Earth and into the new Earth. All available houses were purchased in anticipation of this event, and camper vans, buses, converted trucks, and horse floats arrived and swelled the 100 inhabitants to a population of tens of thousands of people." "Ah, I recall that event also," said Ankai. "The local mayorie had to close all of the roads to prevent even more unwanted travelers from entering the area. They came from all across Europe and around the world. At that time, several explorers had also ventured up Mount Bergerac, conducting their own research, and some of them did not return. Mount Bergerac has the highest recorded suicide and disappearance rate in all of France." Altar looked concerned. The mayor then declared the mountain off limits," he said. "Interestingly," said Imra, "a military envoy from Israel went to Mount Bergerac as they were very interested in what was occurring there." "Several days later," added Kalal, "military Iroquois helicopters could be heard around the mountain, and hanging beneath the helicopters were huge steel drums full of concrete and suspended on cables. And then reports started filtering in, said Altar, saying that the military had sealed off an almost vertical shaft at the entranceway that dropped deep into the mountain. Ah, yes, that is what I also heard, said Ariana. Some of the locals were convinced that this was an entranceway to underground caverns where demonic low-frequency beings would surface from time to time. Hence the disappearances, agreed Ankai, and the suicides. In fact, said Oriol, these mountains are in contrast to one another in terms of their frequency. The mountain where the village of Rennes-le-Chateau is built holds a much different and positive energy. There is always duality, the positive and the negative, the dark and the light. And this is what is happening here. Two opposing frequency portals, side by side. This area is rich with historical events, said Dolkara. And, in fact, in the 14th century, the Cathars influenced the timeline in 2012. However, that is another story for another time. I am so excited that we are travelling on the same route as Arsinoe, said Shamara. Kalal smiled at Shamara. Arsinoe came by another route, he said. She travelled up the Aude Valley from Narbonne, crossing the Corbière mountain range along another ancient track that was cut into the vertical rocks of the Gallimimus Gorge. Hidden deep in the gorge is a cave, and that cave was a natural cavern that was converted into a small church with a stone figurine, a shrine to Mary Magdalene. There are candles and wooden benches there for the pilgrims who wish to recognize her frequency of light. And all of this still exists in Earth's 21st century, said Ariana. To that day, it commemorates Arsinoe as Mary Magdalene. Fortunately, added Irama, the Romans and the many invading forces never discovered that cave. Oriol invited us all to his home to meet his wife, Leia, who had prepared a mid-morning meal. As Oriol was the village mayoree, their house was close to the Magdalene Tower and shared a similar and magnificent view. Once seated on the stone terrace, we all delighted in the beautifully prepared local dish, taking in the splendor of this remote and almost lost-in-time location. After the meal, all of us feeling relaxed as we joyfully shared our adventures, Leia politely interrupted us. We all stopped talking and gave her our full attention. I would like to introduce you to someone who is looking forward to meeting you, she said. Leia left the room and moments later returned with a small, serene young girl. She had auburn hair and big hazel eyes. "This is Sophia," said Leia, and crouched down beside her. The young girl looked at each of us in turn, with a beautiful, warm smile stretched across her face. "Hello," she said softly. "Sophia has lived here all of her life," continued Leia. "She is 8 years of age." Cyndriella stood up. I know you, she gasped as tears welled up in her eyes. She rushed to Sophia's side, and crouching beside her also, she took Sophia's hand. "It is you who has been communicating with me in my dreams, isn't it?" she blurted in soft tones. Sophia lowered her eyes and smiled. "Yes," she said shyly, "it was me." "Now we understand why we are here," exclaimed Cyndriella. "Well, who is Sophia?" asked Shah-Mar-Ra. "And why has she been communicating with Cyndriella?" Leia smiled softly, and standing up, she stroked Sophia's head. "Arsinoe asked us to take care of Sophia because she knew of her forthcoming demise," she said. She knew that there were only so many times that she could escape the relentless pursuit of her adversaries, and that her light family would one day arrive to embrace Sophia and welcome her into their lives. "Oh my!" exclaimed Shah-Mar-Ra. "Sophia is Arsinoe's daughter." "I was waiting to travel to England," said Sophia, "and then on to Scotland, to the Isle of Skye, where I would be on a timeline to meet my mother. And then, together, we would return to the Pleiades star system." Sophia stepped forwards and hugged everyone in turn. As we embraced her, we all wept, remembering the courage of our beautiful sister, Arsinoe. We spent the next few hours sharing our adventures with Sophia so that she would feel familiar with her new family. Later that evening, Dul-Kar-Ra approached Maxim to express his concerns. "I think that we should urgently return to Collioure," he said. "It has been almost 2 weeks since we left Orca II, and the Roman garrison will be asking difficult questions." "Of course, my father will be taking care of everything," interrupted Arnaud. "However, it would be prudent to return. I know of another, more direct route through the Pyrenees that would save us a few days of travel." "All right," said Maxim, and rubbing his hands together, he looked everyone in the eyes. "It is time to return to the cottage. Is everyone in agreement?" "Yes," we all said in unison. "Good," said Maxim. "We will leave at first light tomorrow morning." The next morning, we gathered our few supplies and mounted our respective horses. Carlyle had decided to stay a few extra days with Oriole and Leia, and one by one, we thanked him and wished him well. "Unfortunately, we do not have a spare horse for Sophia," said Oriole. "Who would like to ride with her?" "Oh, she can ride with me," said Cyndriella excitedly. "Splendid," laughed Oriole. Oriole and Leia each gave Sophia a huge hug goodbye, and then Oriole lifted the child up in his arms and settled her in front of Cyndriella. "Goodbye," said Sophia, and waved at Oriole and Leia. "Our hearts will always be joined in love," said Leia. and wiped a tear from her eye. Fortunately, the Roman garrison seldom ventured into the beautiful wilderness of the Pyrenees, and with Arnaud's knowledge of the towns and villages, it took less than 7 days to return to the cottage. Throughout that time, we all shared our mission and knowledge with Sophia, so by the time that we arrived at the cottage, she was an integral part of our family. The next day, Maxim, Dorcara, and Arnaud left the cottage and returned to the home of Vala and Flore with the many spare horses all tethered together. After a cheerful reunion, they all journeyed down to Orca II. "My dear friend Vala," said Maxim, "I see that you have provisioned Orca II with supplies." "Yes, and all under the watchful eyes of the Roman garrison," laughed Vala. Father," began Arnaud, "may I please have your attention, as there is something that I would like to ask you." Vala laughed aloud and slapped his son affectionately on the back. "Ah, no, I already know what it is that you want to ask. You want to travel on Orca II as this wonderful family of light journey to England and Scotland." Arnaud looked down at his feet, a huge smile across his face, and nodded. "Yes, I would." "Well, you are in luck," said Vala. "Your mother and I have already packed your personal belongings and stored them on board. We feel that you have a role to play on the next part of this adventure. I have also told the Roman garrison that you will be accompanying Maxim and Dorcara to Alexandria to assist with the new cargo, and that you will be returning as soon as your assistance is no longer required." Vala turned to Maxim and laughed. "Your family is growing, Maxim." "Yes," laughed Maxim. "Orca II is getting heavier." "But not heavy enough to fool the Roman garrison," explained Vala. "I have strapped large wooden boxes to Orca II's decks, and every evening I have slowly filled them with stones. Now the Roman garrison can see that Orca II is sitting lower in the water with its supposed new cargo." "Aha! Thank you, Vala," said Maxim. "That is clever." As Orca II slowly sailed out of the harbour, Arnaud wiped the tears from his cheeks as he waved to his mother and father. It was late in the evening when Orca II reached the secluded bay near the cottage. Maxim and Dorcara disembarked, gathered the Light family from the cottage, and we all silently returned to Orca II. We were all elated to see that Arnaud would be accompanying us, and after climbing on board, we all shared warm hugs. We felt joyful to be back on the water once again, and settling into the hammocks and cushions on the deck, we all smiled at one another. "And now we set sail for Stonehenge," said Maxim. And so, my journey continues.